All right, guys and girls, this is Jerningham here. Health Secretary Matt Hancocks. Hopefully, we have our route out of this with a sense and vaccination. The lockdown, obviously. I've done a few videos today. I've not uploaded them just yet. I'm putting them all together first. Let's get into the video.
The Health Secretary Matt Hancock joins us once again on the programme. Mr. Hancock, as always, good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. A year on from the first lockdown, a day of reflection. I wonder how you'll be spending it.
Well, I'll be working mostly. I'll be working on the vaccine rollout and trying to get us out of this. And that's what I spend all my waking hours on at the moment. I thought that was a very moving package that you've just shown, and I think a lot of people will be feeling the same as the emotions expressed in it, both by His Royal Highness the Prince Charles and also by the members of the public, explaining that this has been an incredibly difficult year and probably the hardest year in a generation, and yet we all search for hope as well, don't we? And the hope is that we now have a route out of this, and that route is possible because of the wonders of science and the scale of the vaccination programme.
The wonders of science is a very good way of putting it. But on the vaccination route out of this, reports this morning that the government, that you in fact and the Prime Minister have agreed to a change in the law that would compel people working in care homes to have a vaccine. Is that accurate?
Well, no decisions have been taken. As you know, we have a task force looking at the question of certification of whether there's things that you need to be able to show that you've had a vaccine or indeed a test in order to be able to do. That looks both at these questions around international travel, but is also looking at the question of whether, in order to be able to care for people professionally, then you ought to have protected yourself so that you can't infect others. This is something that happens already. For instance, doctors have to have the hepatitis B vaccine, and it's clearly something that has important moral questions on both sides. So it is something that we're looking at, but no decisions have yet been taken.
Important moral questions, important legal questions as well. I mean, you would presumably expect a decision such as this to be challenged in the court. So on that basis, are you currently looking at vaccination not simply of those who work in care homes, but perhaps mandatory vaccination for, as you put it just a moment ago, people working in care, people caring, which could generally apply to quite a lot of people in the health service as well?
Well, as I say, this already is the case in terms of hepatitis B in the NHS for doctors. So there is a clear precedent for this proposition. At the moment, what we're looking at is for those who work in care homes, elderly care homes, on the grounds that they are the most vulnerable to this disease. That's why they were in the very first cohort of the groups to be vaccinated. It's something that some care homes have actually called for, because it would require a change in the law through secondary legislation, and therefore I entirely understand why some care homes, wanting to take that duty of care over those who are in that home for the residents, are keen for us to be able to take this step, so that they can require people who could otherwise pass on the virus to take the vaccine.
There is, of course, a kind of fairly big question that follows all of this, that if we are actively considering mandatory vaccination if you want to work in a care setting, could we consider mandatory vaccination more generally in the population at large? I mean, the JCVI modelling showed us, I think it was at the tail end of last week, the ideal percentage targets for vaccination. And we're looking at 75% coverage in under 50s when we get to that stage. That is a big target. Now, if we're not coming close to that target, are there circumstances in which you could see mandatory vaccination for people under the age of 50?
No, we've ruled that out for the general population. And there's a difference, which is if you if you as a profession care for people and are therefore in very close contact with them, then that is different to the general population. On these percentages, they are important. The uptake amongst the groups that we're vaccinating is unbelievably high, over 95% now in the most elderly groups, and for care home workers, where it is a bit lower, it is now greater than 3/4 in elderly care homes amongst staff who've been vaccinated. Amongst residents, it's over 90%. So these take-up rates are really,
sorry
really.
To interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. We've got so much to get through, and I think the point in terms of vaccination in care homes has been made. But there will be people looking at the rate of progress that we are making in terms of vaccinations and wondering why the government is bringing forward, fines of £5,000 for people who head abroad without good excuse. I mean, it does seem that the government this morning is basically saying, look, until at the very earliest July, summer is cancelled if you're looking to go abroad at the time.
Yep.
No, I think it's quite important to clear this one up. The questions of whether people will be able to travel abroad this summer are going to be addressed by the Global Travel Task Force, which is reporting around the 12th of April, so middle of next month. The roadmap sets out that the earliest date by which we will allow for international travel without one of the clear excuses, reasons that you need now, is the 17th of May. That has not changed. The way we're putting that into law is as part of these roadmap regulations that will be voted on Thursday, and they come to an end as a whole at the end of June, but that doesn't change the timings for these questions on international travel. Now, having said all of that, it is now too early to know where the Global Travel Task Force will come out and know what the decision will be for the 17th of May. And the reason for that is that we are seeing this third wave rising in some parts of Europe, and we're also seeing new variants, and it is very important that we protect the progress that we've been able to make here in the UK, where we have now
from the
one of
Prime
the
Minister
lowest.
yesterday. I mean, he was talking about a third wave, developing in Europe and washing up on our shores. When a wave hits our European friends, he said, it ends up on our shores. It seems a slightly strange way of talking about it, given that this third wave, if you want to call it that, in Europe emerged, not far from where I'm standing, in Kent. We exported it to the European Union.
Well, it shows what an international challenge this is, and what we have to do is all work as much as we can together. But it also shows why we're being cautious on international travel, because we've seen these waves come before. We saw the first and then the second, and they both ended up here.
But we beefed
in a
up our
bad
borders. The action that you took most recently on our borders was, in your own words, to prevent new variants from arriving here and to prevent cases coming to the United Kingdom. Why should we be worried in any way about a third wave happening on the continent, given the changes that you've made?
Well, we should be concerned because we have seen the impact before, and the question that you
system.
We did, absolutely, but we also have a desire, if possible, if it's safe to do so, to open up international travel. Of course, I understand people want a summer holiday abroad if it's safe, and we've got to make that decision on whether it's safe, and we'll do that according to the timetable that's set out in the roadmap. Now, the good news is that thankfully we have this very significant vaccine rollout here. Yesterday we saw the 30 millionth vaccine overall, both first and second doses combined. And this vaccine program is clearly saving lives here, but we need to make sure that we protect that rollout from the concerns that might come from new variants, and we need to work on understanding more about that.
If you're wanting to take credit for the vaccination program, and I understand when you do, then you have to, at some point, accept some of the criticism that is laid at the door. We are a year on from the first lockdown, and according to the Johns Hopkins tracking, we are 5th in total deaths, 6th in deaths per 100,000, 6th in deaths per population. Why has that happened? Why, in terms of mortality, compared to other countries, have we done so poorly?
Well, that's a very important question, and it's one that it'll be the right time to assess that in the future. But now, the right task is to spend all of our energies on
So can you explain
suppressing this virus.
We are a year on. We are on, according to you, the third wave might be on its way here. When is the appropriate time? You know, if things go badly, we could still be in this same time next year. If things go catastrophically, we could still be in this in some form. At which point you could again say, look, we're still in the middle of it. We're still dealing with it.
Exactly.
You've been in charge of our pandemic response. You personally must have an idea why we are 6th in the world in deaths per capita.
Well, I think the point that you make is an important one, because it's trying to get this country out of this pandemic. That is what I spend all of my time on. And vital and central to that task is constantly to learn about what has worked well and what we need to do better and differently. And we've done that throughout this crisis.
The forum for that presumably would be an independent inquiry. I'm not going to waste your time or mine by asking for you to promise that one will be set up straight away. But perhaps on today of all days, you could reiterate, in fact, the promise that the Prime Minister made in July of last year, that there will be a full inquiry as soon as possible.
Yes, I think of course, the Prime Minister set out that there needs to be all of these questions, and I think that's totally reasonable, not least because we need permanently to be ready for another pandemic. That is a fact of life, and it's something that we need to be prepared for, and we need to make sure that all of the learnings and all of the scientific improvements we've been talking about are understood, and that we are properly ready. But you know, what we need to do right now is learn those lessons in practice to make sure that the actions that we take now are guided by our best understanding of this virus and our best understanding of the pandemic, and we've done that throughout. You know, that has led to the roadmap with its cautious, but I very much hope irreversible timetable. And you know, we get people saying, "Can't you go faster?" and "Can't you open up international travel, you know, more easily?" And also some people saying, "Can't you go slower?" But I think the general bulk of the population, most people, think that this is at about the right pace, and the scientists, the best science, thinks that this is at about the right pace. But we'll keep monitoring the data to make sure that it's safe to take each step, and that, you know, that's at the core. That builds on learning, you know, as much as we can, and trying to make the very best judgments in what are very difficult circumstances.
They are very.
Well, there we have it, guys and girls.
We do need to let you go.
I hope you all enjoyed that. Give it a like, give it a comment, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for joining me. Peace. Hopefully things can get better at the end of the day. Or wish and hope that we all. Peace.